and 90% of everybody's brain who sees this at any time ever and sees me yell and sees my face light up and all the emotion and everything that goes along with that will be able to determine that it's likely I'm in a Y. And they don't know anything about it. They haven't done the research. They just know we're all hardwired the same way. Yet somehow these brilliant people who happen to be in university and academics tend to ignore that and just go with just the words, just the academic version of it. And they don't look at how these words actually are working. Well, they're trying to figure out how these words are, but they're doing it without bringing in the emotion. So that's not possible for a human being. In my opinion, we've got two parts, to, well, way more than two parts to our brain, but we've got cognitive and emotional at the very least, which sort of brings us to what we're talking about tonight, which is keep your commitments to yourself. And it's basically promises made are promises kept. Okay, that's basically what these commitments are meaning. It's not meaning keep them private to yourselves. It means keep them, keep your commitments. And it's more important for you to keep your commitments with yourself, to yourself, than for somebody else, because those are the things that actually drive self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, all of those things. I don't know about you, but I had a couple, minor screw-ups today. I had to reschedule a meeting that I was unable to make due to an overrun. But because it was overrun and I didn't get a chance to check my emails and I didn't have the immediate link to reschedule the meeting, I felt absolutely terrible because it was also with a person I've never met before. So, and I was introduced and I felt like, God, I let him down. But then I was walking the dog and I realized, who are you mad at? And I'm mad at myself. I'm pissed off. And then I said, are you actually mad and pissed off? And by this time I was out shoveling the snow and I realized I'm disappointed in me. And I feel like I'm beating myself up. I'm lowering my self-worth, self-confidence, and self-esteem incrementally, not a lot, but my self-esteem was lowered more than my self-confidence. I figured out that too, by the way, just playing around with these things, just measuring it where it was. But self-esteem dropped. I did not hold my esteem. I don't hold myself in esteem when I make those kinds of errors and then let other people down as a result of it. It doesn't work well for me. So it was just a very intriguing breakdown and seeing, recognizing where I am, how I was doing things. So getting back to our topic on when do we, like the question is, and again, Jamie joined us, Tim, Sherry, we're doing the same thing as last week. So anybody who wants to jump on can just raise your hand. So we'll put out another one there because a few more people jumped on. John Sue's mic is still not working. So that'll be some other time, unfortunately. Jamie, if you wanted to jump on, you definitely could. Just throw it in the chat or put your hand up, whichever works for you. And we can throw you on here too. Basically, do you guys notice that when you don't keep a commitment, what happens to yourself? And how do you wind up viewing yourself? So, John, I'll pick on you first. I'm picking on you tonight.
Well, that's low-hanging fruit. I could totally relate to what you're saying. When I think habitually in the past, I've tended to be more diligent about keeping my commitments to others than I have to myself. But it definitely, when I don't, I take a hit on my self-esteem.
Yeah. So what do you said something else that I was going to get into next, and that was not keeping commitments to yourself. So what does that do to you?
In terms of progress, it would be, I guess, I'd have to consider a setback because I haven't done something that I set out to do. I haven't made the progress I set out to make. If you mean what does it do internally, there's, like you said, there's a sense of disappointment. I think there can be some element of shame at times.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complicated bundle of emotions there. Yeah, frustration for sure.
Oh yeah. One of the things that I think we should attempt to do is start teasing out the emotions and start being able to name and label what those emotions are. And you were asking for naming and labeling. Well, here's one of those case studies that you were requesting right here for yourself right now. Okay, so the case study here is name and label at least 4 to 5 emotions that you feel in this situation, because feelings in this scenario are not going to be likely just one thing. There's going to be a bundle of different emotions that happen, and the angle at which you view them from will possibly trigger multiple different reactions. Case in point, for myself, when I'm disappointed with myself, one of the things that I noticed that I have to be cautious of, if I feel that somebody is making a request of me and I'm feeling pressured for time or whatever, and it's somebody that I know personally, like my wife, my kids, coworkers, that sort of thing, I can become much more agitated much more quickly and less reasonable than I would like to be, because my sense of my frustration is higher, but it's with myself, and my self-esteem is actually lower. So that triggers me. Now, when I notice that, I also now have named and labeled that process, by the way, where process versus content, here's a process piece. So by actually naming and labeling those pieces, I wind up recognizing what I might do differently as a result. And again, building out a model for how to identify what I feel, to then say, what might I do differently? And when I ask myself the question, what I might do differently, the first thing that I do with emotions, actually, I'm going to ask Dwayne, what do you think the first thing that you need to do when you have emotions? Like what I described myself as having.
I would think the first thing you would need to do would be just to acknowledge the emotion.
Exactly. And then what? So first thing is acknowledge.
Category or
actually, here, I've got a big wall, and it's a whiteboard. So first one is,
Blair, where you're writing is kind of a big white spot from your light. Can you drop it down about 6 inches to a foot?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much for telling me. And I'm going to try doing this differently here. Switching out lights.
That's better.
Okay, that's softer, and it moves it over.
Yeah, right. Okay. There's a different spot, but much less bright.
Two. So first thing was acknowledge. What do you think the next thing is?
Name it. Acknowledge it, name it, categorize it, file it.
So in acknowledging it, what are you acknowledging it as?
As the feeling that it is.
Right, thank you. So acknowledge. And when you acknowledge the feeling, what do? Have you ever thought you had one feeling only to find out later that what you named and labeled it wasn't exactly accurate?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and what happens when you go off acting on that mislabeled feeling? Which do you act on, the label or the feeling?
Feeling.
Label.
I think I've done both. I think it kind of depends on the situation.
It really does, doesn't it? And then you can really, okay, this takes me back to when I was dating and a long time. And when I figured out this stuff is both are highly probable. So one of the things here is if you want to confuse the crap out of your potentially, hopefully girlfriend down the road, but she'll probably dump you in the process because you're too messed up. You do both at the same time. Label it as one thing and act on it as though it's something else. Like if you become a complete schizoid for her. So because you name and label it, you call it, okay, I'm trying to be empathetic. Really, I am trying to empathize here, and you're not being very helpful. Does that sound like I'm empathetic or angry?
Angry and frustrated.
I'm very frustrated, and so I've got a whole lot of confused feelings and names and labels. So these things don't work real well. So what do we need to do next? Once we acknowledge that there are feelings there, and we said name and label, but I'm suggesting that there's one thing that we need to do.
We ask ourselves a question.
Great. Okay.
What is this that I'm feeling?
That's a good one, John.
That's kind of the default position with mind models is if you don't have a better answer, ask a question.
Absolutely. It really is. But what are we actually doing with this? What is it?
Curious, right?
That I'm feeling. Okay, so, and one of the things in terms of a process flow, if we want to kill two birds with one stone right now, we're starting to build a bit of a model here, but this step 2, possibly the next step, but definitely the step here is test. You got to test. Okay. And the key element that I needed to learn from all of this stuff was not to take myself as though everything that I say and do is 100% accurate just because I say it and I think I'm doing it, but get it externally verified. And that's where the testing comes in. Okay, you have to externally verify. Do you see me as being the way that I think I'm being? When I'm saying I'm being empathetic and yelling at you, is that empathetic to you? Or what Trevor had to correct me spontaneously there and corrected me into saying, oh, Jesus, this guy looks like he's, at the very least, he's frustrated. And likely frustrated and angry to some degree. But
frustrated seemed to be the dominant emotion there.
Right, exactly. And I would not disagree with that, but it sure as hell was not empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my name and label is completely wacko. Now, that's one of the things that I wanted to tie into keeping your commitments to yourself. So a promise made is a promise kept. But do you know how to keep your promises? Okay. And in other words, is what you've actually promised, either yourself or somebody else, is that actually something that is accurate? Okay. So where do we have to, Dwayne, where do we have to find this accuracy? What's the point of this?
The first thing that I would like to address before we move, or ask, may I ask, is where or does it play into, whereas Trevor seemed you were frustrated, but I think me and John, not knowing you, seemed this anger. I mean, does that play into the scenarios here?
It might to some degree. It also tells me that different people have different views of what things are. Okay, so what do we have to do? And that's literally where I'm going with this question. And Jamie Allen said perception. Absolutely spot on. It's all about perception. But what is it with perception? So can frustration be part of anger?
Yes.
Yes. Is anger a broader concept than frustration? Can you be a little angry and really a lot of anger? And Jamie is saying yes, 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 yes. Rebecca just said, what is true for them? Sorry, do you want to just read that? I've got my thing covered.
What is true for them? What have they named and labeled it as? I think she's referring to what's true for different people and their
right, exactly. And you're spot on there, Rebecca. Perception is their own reality. What are we trying to do here? What are we needing to do with these mind models?
To get a shared perception by this external verification.
Sorry, what was that?
By using the external verification, we're trying to get a shared reality or a shared perception.
Bingo, yes, we're trying to get a common or shared reality. Now, the funny thing is that it's not all that challenging to do, but if we don't attempt to do that, we drift apart in our realities of how we think we see the world. But we come together when we start building shared realities, because that's where it is. Now, there was a study done, this lady, one of the first female anthropologists, and it's not Jane Goodall, but it's another one. She was with chimpanzees. Anyway, I forget her name, but she did a groundbreaking bit of research. She got emotions, pictures of people's faces that were an emotional, sad, happy, mad, angry, frustrated. And she got 100 of these different pictures. And this is back in the 1940s. And or 30s even, I don't know, it was a long time ago. She was one of the first women that studied this area at all. And she flew around the world finding these remote islands to, India, to Pakistan, to Japan, all over the world, North America, Europe, Scandinavian countries, African countries, everywhere she could go. Every single continent was covered in this study. And all she'd do is ask people with a translator there, what was the emotion that this face, this picture of this face showed? And what do you think the correlation was around the world? What do you think the results came back as? Dwayne.
Probably pretty universal. I mean, I would think that it was pretty common with everybody. Just guessing.
You're absolutely right. 92%. It was amazing because it was 92% of the world of these people. Like, I don't know, something like 8,000 people she ran this test on. 92%. Doesn't matter what language, doesn't matter what upbringing, doesn't matter your socioeconomic standing. You are going to call it exactly the same thing that everybody else would. So the probability of us being able to align emotionally on what that emotion is very, very high. Now, the funny thing is, in families, when you run that throughout a family, you will get variances greater than 92% alignment. Now, what causes that? Do you have any idea what might cause that, John?
Oh, that's funny you asked that. Because when you did that, I was flashing on my father because he used to do a thing where I am not angry. Do not pay attention to the tone of my voice. And so
you just did that, hit the nail on the head with that example. By the way,
families, it's kind of like that. There's these manipulations or what. I'm not sure quite what to name it, but it's the denial factor that.
We want to be seen by the people around us the way we want to be seen. So we will cause people, try and force people to see us the way we want to be seen, whether or not we're behaving that way or not. Okay, so your father's trying to say, I'm not angry when he's actually angry.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rebecca, spot on there. Because we pick up on the nuances and the levels of the emotions aren't so cut and dried. You're absolutely right. Because there are more than one emotion at play. And that's really the key, is that there's more than one at play. So your father would want to have, he's intending to focus on one emotion, yet his emotional being is projecting a different emotion. So the alignment of those emotions is not there because there are more than one emotion happening simultaneously. That's how come I suggested to you, John, is like figure out the top, 4 or 5 emotions that are at play here. And that's the thing that's worthwhile to start working on, is to start naming and labeling them. And then you can ask people to see if how you see yourself is how they see you. So if you do that, and one of the cool things we'll probably have time to be doing and probably have to do in the Mind Model Coach training is go through describing feelings. Because that exercise is huge in being able to understand how people are and describing what it is that you're feeling. So it's generally very effective. Okay, Jamie says, we're used to thinking in one emotion when there are many. That is so true. When people ask us, how do you feel? You expect them to give you one, not several. Absolutely true. It's socialized expectations, but there's way more than one at play. And so we just give the dominant one. And that's a real, it's important because we start building out what's going on. So what we wind up doing is we also have this thing happening. And what happens is we've got a bunch of different emotions firing off here, but we have one that we're really conscious of. So I often share the story of my daughter. She was 2, I think she was at the time, and she was very strong-willed at that moment in time, and we were going shopping actually, and we needed to get going back home. Well, not we weren't going. We were done with shopping and heading home, and I took her by the hand to bring her over to her mom, and she pulled back, and she pulled back hard. No words were exchanged to start off with. And then I started trying to talk with her, and she was pulling back really, really hard. But the thing that I saw, and all of this took place in seconds here, is she said, "No, I don't want to do this. Like, I want to go home, or I want to do something else." And I was trying to take her over to her mother to get her jacket on so we could go home. And her back was at the corner of a shopping cabinet there, right at the height of her head and neck. And because she's a little, yeah, exactly. I let go, she goes flying backwards into the corner, and real damage could be done. So what I wound up doing is I wound up grabbing her harder, and she just pulled back even harder on that, thinking I was mad at her. So, and I was getting frustrated with her because she was not listening to me, and my face probably started showing the worry and the frustration and the anger and everything else that was going through me, but small anger and a whole lot of frustration. She actually dislocated her elbow, which is really easy for a young child because you have this little loop that goes around a bone right here, and it can pop off, as I found out. Also found out how to pop it on when we took her to the hospital because she was complaining of all kinds of pain with that, and I felt terrible, like I was an abusive father or something. And
we had the same experience with our son twice, and we learned about turning the wrist. And
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the first time I learned it in the hospital, and it happened twice with her too. Popped it back on, just a quick flick of the wrist, and it's done. Well, the whole forearm, but it's done. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I started recognizing is the second time that happened wasn't because I was angry and whatnot. It was another situation. It came out easily. But I realized I could adjust my emotions by going, what is, like there's another, yes, I'm frustrated with her right in that emotion, but this line across here represents the line of conscious awareness. What am I consciously aware of? I have all these emotions that I have going on. My frustration with that situation was the biggest thing that that was in my consciousness at the time. All of these are subconscious. But I can ask myself a question: what feeling do I have, and what feeling do I want to act on? Okay? So 2 questions. What feeling do I have? And I'm frustrated. And then the second one is, what feeling do I want to act on? Well, what happens if I choose to go, I have a big one, but I can modify this line of what I'm conscious of and focus on the fact that I love her. And this line here is, whoopsie, frustration. So I can focus on the fact that I actually love her. Now, I remember doing this also in a life skills group, and somebody said, but that's so phony, that's so fake. And I go, hold it, do I not love my daughter in that moment? Well, you're frustrated with her. Yes, but does that frustration mean that does it remove the fact that I love her? And the answer is no. It's like I'm behaving on one of those emotions. And it's like the questioning process that I was putting myself through earlier, like today with that, when my self-esteem self-worth and self-esteem took a bit of a hit because I missed that meeting. but then I can actually start saying, what do I want to focus on? And I chose to focus on getting resourceful and sent the guy a text, and he was thrilled to hear from me and said, no problem at all. I see that, and I decided to, what might I be able to do to move forward with this? And the quick answer was to simply reschedule and see if he had a problem, I'd hear about it, but I'd let him decide if there was a problem with this, rather than having my brain run rampant with emotional loading and my self-worth feeling bad, saying, well, I guess I blew that. I can't afford to go talk to him. But that was where I noticed my self-confidence didn't take that big of a hit. My self-worth did, but my self-confidence didn't. And so I decided, oh, well, I still feel like I have the self-confidence to go out there and to reschedule the meeting. So all of a sudden, by being able to choose this stuff functionally, it became really easy for me to recover in minutes, actually, once this thing happened, as opposed to hours. And yes, the circumstances were that I was walking the dog and thinking about this stuff, and then came back, shoveled the sidewalk, and thought about it a bit more. So I couldn't do anything about that. But all of the process was figured out of how to handle it, how to manage myself, and what to text them and to deal with the whole thing and take action. And it was done. And it just happens so effortlessly when you know how to decide to choose the emotions, the construct of how I want to behave, so that I can behave more effectively and keep my word as best I can. Even though I broke my word, sort of, like, stuff happened, life got in the way, and stuff happens. So how do you recover from it? Do you feel badly and beat yourself up all day? Or do you take action and see what the consequences actually are, rather than trying to invent problems that don't happen? Another great minor statistic, I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but there is a stat that I've just got to share. And this stat is huge. It's what percentage, best guess, what do you think the percentage is of things that you worry about are actually real? 4%. What is that? What was that, Dwayne?
4%.
4% of the things. You're very, very hot, actually. You're one off, actually. It's 3% of the things that you worry about are actually true. So 4%, you're close enough. So yeah, Rebecca, 3%. Yeah, you told us last time. Haha, right. Thank you, Jamie. Yes, 3%. So pop quiz, you guys passed. So it is staggering to me how much potential room there is for somebody to practice worrying about things that they don't need to worry about. And again, when you know that stat, it sure as heck helped me move on very rapidly with just what to do next, and go, hey, I'm probably worrying about something I don't need to worry about. Let's at least find out and test it out, take some action, see what happens, and boom, I've got something happening right there. Jumping in can make something happen by that next week, and it's gone.
So Blair, looping back to keeping commitments and all that.
Yep.
How does this tie in?
Well, basically, it's like I was saying before, if I don't beat myself up unnecessarily for commitments I break, I can still go back and make things happen. Now, maintaining your ability and doing the things that you can, no matter how diligent you are, you're still going to not make commitments 100% of the time. Life happens. It's just that simple. But what can you do about it? Well, that's what you can do about it right there, is that, like, don't worry about it. Number one, like, you can take a look at your behavior, evaluate yourself, do like Colin said, self-evaluate. followed up by what might I do differently by creating this space and time for that action to occur, which is literally what I did. If you want to start naming and labeling the mind models, it's exactly what Colin just laid out there. He gave us a process flow to follow with questions. And like John, you were saying right there, it's like ask a question. So that's what you do is you ask a question, you set a test, and that question that you ask, when you say, what is it that I'm feeling? You name that. And then what might I do about that? So the next step is 3. What might I do? And step 4 is just quickly do. Do the action. Or as Jamie put it even more succinctly, she just said, take action. Took action, but yes, or Rebecca, who the hell? Jamie said that. And that's absolutely correct. So you take action. And when you take action, how do you wind up feeling when you take action? 90% of the time, John, what do you feel?
Better, much better.
Much better. Like this is like almost an instant cure for depression is what I wound up recognizing with people that were chronically depressed. If you can cause people to take action, they change state. Now, okay, different story, different scenario, but my personal life. So this week has been a big shift for me in my life over the last, since August it was. When did we go to Austin? That was in September?
That was end of September.
End of September. I wound up getting a big bear hug from this guy that is he's not exactly a bodybuilder, but he's a martial arts expert and he teaches people in martial arts. And he has this irritating habit of hugging people and picking them up. And I swear he cracked my rib or ribs because and I've gone to the doctor twice about it and got, all kinds of tests done on kidneys, on all kinds of stuff because it was all lower back. Just wanted to make sure that my kidneys weren't failing or whatever. Like they put me through a battery of exams and then and x-rays, and they didn't see anything, but they said it's not probable that they'll actually see something unless we give you this radioactive dye, but the radioactive dye is probably as bad as just letting it heal, and it can do more harm to your body and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's not worth the risk, Blair. Okay, fine. Anyway, the guy said September, October, November, December, January. So 5 months. The doctor said it could take up to 6 months. And it was painful. And it's been painful, a lot of pain. So, but I actually, because I had so much pain, I stopped physically moving as much as I'm used to. Well, at my age, one of the things that also does is that creates additional pain because my body is not moving. Now I have to get back into my exercise routine and everything else and get myself moving again. And it's like, oh God, it's like painful, but I'm pushing through with this stuff. At least I'm not losing my breath by the catching in my hips, but the lack of movement, the lack of action causes pain, both physically and mentally. And if you succumb to the mental lack of pain, there was a special that I was watching on Netflix, and it was this guy about movement and whatnot. And he literally said, if you're sitting around for months at a time, especially at my age, like anybody over 40 is susceptible to this, and I'm well over 40. So the bottom line was that the body starts reinforcing what you do the most. So if you're sitting there, laying there, the body will actually start calcifying in a way that facilitates the lack of movement. And that's not a good thing. So I got to get up and going and deal with the pain, but not the incredible stitches that came and like the pain of having a cracked rib. Anyway, that again goes back to, if I don't make promises to myself, or if I make a promise to myself and I don't keep it, I'm not practicing what I preach, number one. Number two, I'm not practicing how to make improvements. And self-improvement is a self-discipline. And if I don't do it, it really doesn't matter what I say to myself. I'm not improving. I'm staying stuck. And it doesn't matter if I say I'm not stuck. I'm stuck. And that's the reality of the situation. And that's where I go, it's not worth staying stuck for that. Okay, comments. Blair, cowboy up and just move. Just do it. Absolutely. Well, that's what I did this week. I've been getting up like at 6:30. Melissa caught me going out of the house. Didn't catch me. Saw me going out of the house. She came downstairs after I got up. Normally, when Melissa was doing all of her bodybuilding, she'd be up and out of the house by 6 or 6:30, and she'd be gone. And I'd get up around 7 and start getting everything moving forward by that time. But this time, I'm up before she is and getting myself out of the house by 6:30 to the gym. So it was a shocker. And she literally asked me, "Are you sick? Are you not feeling well?" It's like, what's the problem? Well, I've come to the determination that my ribs are healed enough. They're not perfect, but they're not catching like they were all the time. And I don't like the way my body feels. So I'm going to do something about it. I'm changing. And that's it. And so I've been 2 days of consistency shooting for 3 tomorrow. So that's it. So yay, me. Yes. Okay. With that, where do we want to go from here? What have you guys taken away from this lesson tonight? Dwayne, John, Trevor.
Well, learning to maybe deal with multiple emotions at one time by stepping back and asking myself what's happening here, what I need to do.
Okay. Basically, the first thing I would suggest is being able to accurately name and label them. And when I was in coach training, and especially trainer training, my trainer had me notice my emotions. Once I was able to basically name and label how I was feeling, it was interesting because I could figure out, as I was driving home, she said, "Blair, at each lamppost, check in with yourself and see how you're feeling." And you go, I'm driving home. What's the difference? It's to learn how to name and label those subtle feelings. And there is a difference. If you're true with yourself, you're going to feel the difference at each lamppost that you're driving by. And there were lots of lampposts between where our training went and home. And sure enough, every one I could start naming and labeling how I was feeling, what the difference was, where one was, and start naming and labeling it. When you can name and label those subtle differences, you start recognizing your shifts in yourself. You know that other people are shifting. They probably won't be shifting consciously, but they'll definitely be shifting subconsciously. So can you identify those subtle cues that are in those shifts that are happening differently? And that's where alignment comes from. That's where recognizing how to do and be different starts, come in there and make it very, very specific on how you're feeling. And that naming and labeling helps you identify yourself and where you're going. What Jamie Allen says, to breathe, stop, ask yourself a question, to name and label, and then take action.
That's what she's saying she got out of it.
Yeah. Well done, Jamie. Okay. Name and label feelings, breathe, create space, ask, and then do it. Yes. I love that, Colin. Well done. Dwayne, same thing. Well done. Okay. John, what did you pull from this?
I think the biggest part for me was kind of really cementing this idea that, or the awareness that there are multiple emotions at one time, and not feeling obligated to narrow it down to just one, to pick the dominant one, but to be aware. And so maybe that process is, what am I feeling? What else is my feeling? What else? And dig
Exactly.
for it. Because, as you were talking about the different ones and multiple things you've talked about tonight, I kept thinking there's probably an element of fear in there. Even, worry, fear, even with the anger, there's some element of fear. So
feeling out of control, feeling, that you're judging yourself, or you might be judged by others, or self-consciousness, like all of those things are all possibilities.
And even just the incomplete awareness of what you're feeling can be a little scary. So I think that just going through that process has to be, soothing is not the right word, but comforting, maybe calming.
Absolutely. When you know that you don't know it all, but it's still part of yourself, and it may not be as accurate as you like, it may not be as complete as you like, there's a lot of self-acceptance you can wind up doing in that process. You don't have to carry burdens because you don't know. And that's okay. It's not having to know it all. Okay? Cool. Well done. Trevor.
For me, it was a good refresher, but also it was really interesting to see how you connected this to keeping your commitments to yourself. Before coming in to the training, I didn't know what direction you were going to take that. So you did end up going in a direction that I was familiar with, but not connected in that way. So that was cool.
Nice. Okay. Well, keeping commitments to yourself, there's so many, there's at least 5 angles that I teach the same skill set on. It depends what comes up in discussions or where I am tonight. But one of the angles is about yourself and promises. And where do promises come from? And they always start with an emotional base of what you feel you should do, which means you can do it from a should or a might perspective. And if you do it from a should perspective, you're probably coming across on how you think others see you. But if you shift your perspective to a might perspective, how might I see myself? You can actually have a view of yourself and not worry about how other people view you. It's fine. When I figured that one out, I found it very freeing. And that's where I was with that story that I shared about that guy Lee earlier today, where I screwed up because I ran over. I didn't get to him fast enough. I couldn't let him know that I couldn't make it because I was in a client meeting with a client. That meeting ran over. I felt badly that I couldn't do it. And then what do I want to do? Yes, I felt badly when I focused on him, what I should have done. But when I went with what might I do and bring that past future thing and bring it to the now, all that negative emotion went into a much more positive structure about how I can take charge of my life, not live in that ick that I had bits and pieces of. I don't mind a little bit of the ick because it helps me remember not to do that to people as best I can. But I don't want to ever minimize other people to the point where I don't feel something about, like, when I am ineffective with those people, I don't want to minimize it and say, well, that's too bad. That's their problem, not mine. That's bullshit too. Like, it's my problem. I caused it. So I'll own up to it, but I don't want to wallow in it. I want to move through it as quickly and as constructively as I can. And quick and constructive is really the piece that I focused on. And that's the might piece. Anyway, there's a bunch of other ways to look at the same stuff about keeping commitments to yourself and others and what that is. But that's another one. That's actually the one that I was thinking I'd focus on tonight. But the emotion one came up, which is a really good one. Really good one. Okay. Cool. Thanks so much. Anyway, there are a few people on the call. Some of them are leaving. But if, Sherry, if there's any new person here that wanted to be profiled, that's fine. If not, we'll call it a wrap for tonight.
And for those of you that don't know, profiling is where Blair talks to you for a few seconds and listens to your language pattern and then tells you all about yourself. Sort of like a reading, except it's not. So he can give you a profile on yourself. So if you're interested in that, just raise your hand or let me know in the chat, and we'll bring you on with your audio and video.
And if not, I'll thank Dwayne for showing up here, and John, and being on our panelists tonight. And it's thrilling to have you guys back here as regulars on the show. So it's great. Thank you. And nobody's raising their hand. And great call. Thanks. Hope, on panelists next week. Yeah, me too, Jeremy. Love to have you back on. Okay. And keep in mind, there were case studies and whatnot. So what I'd like you to do is, John suggested that there were a possibility for case studies. If there's something that you specifically would like to work on, I'm totally game to do that and work it through from a mind model perspective and say, okay, this is what we can do. Now, you don't have to name and label your mind model. You just have to have a situation, and we can show you how to build on situations and make shifts happen. So, okay. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for coming out. It's now 5 after the top of the hour, so it's been about an hour. So time to wrap it up, I guess. Says I'm not getting it. Thank you. Tim, yeah, glad you were on again, Tim. Thanks. Hope the kids settle down for next week as well. Anyway, you guys take care. Have yourselves a good night. Okay?
Thanks.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye for now.